Go Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityananda. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Charani Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Pascha Charani Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Shivasri Gopal Pravrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 7, verse 24. Anvayara Prati Rekena Vivekeno Tatmana Svargastana Samanya Vimrishadvin Bir Asatvarai. Translation. Sober and expert persons should search for the spirit soul with minds purified through analytical study in terms of the soul's connection with and disconnection from all things that undergo creation, maintenance, and destruction. Report. A sober person can study himself and distinguish the soul from the body by analytical study. For example, when one considers his body, his head, hands, and so on, one can certainly understand the difference between the spirit, soul, and the body. No one says, I head. Everyone says, my head. Thus, there are two entities, the head and mind. They are not identical, although they appear to be one conglomeration. One may argue, when we analyze the body, we find a head, hands, legs, belly, blood, bones, urine, stool, and so on. But after everything is considered, where is the existence of the soul? The soul man, however, avails himself of this Vedic instruction. Yato vahimani bhutane jayante, ena jatani jivanti, yat prayanti abhishanti, tad vijigasavasva, tad brahmayati. Taittiriya Upanishad. Thus you can understand that the head, hands, legs, and indeed the entire body have grown on the basis of the soul. If the soul is within the body, head, hands, and legs grow, but otherwise they do not. A dead child does not grow up, for the soul is not present. If by careful analysis of this body one cannot find the existence of the soul, this is due to his ignorance. How can a gross man fully engaged in materialistic activities understand the soul, which is a small particle of spirit, 1/10,000th the sun is of the tip of the hair? Such a person foolishly thinks that the material body is grown from a combination of chemicals, although he cannot find them. The Vedas inform us, however, that chemical combinations do not constitute the living force. The living force is Atma and Parramatta, and the body grows on the basis of that living force. The fruit of a tree grows and undergoes 6 kinds of changes because of the presence of the tree. If there's no tree, there can be no passion of growth and maturity of fruit. Therefore, beyond the existence of the body are Parramatta and Atma within the body. This is the first understanding of spiritual knowledge explained in Bhagavatam Gita. The body exists because of the presence of the Supreme Lord and the Jiva, which is part of the Lord. This is further explained by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita. Maya tatamidam sarvam jagavyakta murtina vastani sarvabhutani vachaham teshvastataha. By me, my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. The Supreme Soul exists everywhere. The Vedas enjoin Sarvam Kavati Idam Brahma. Everything is Brahman, or expansion of Brahman's energies. Sutra and money cannot be thought. Everything rests on the Lord. It's as pearls strung together on a thread. The thread is the principle, Brahman. He is the supreme cause, the supreme Lord of everything rests. Mata and Parramatta. Thus we must study the Atma and Paramatta, individual soul and super soul, upon whom the entire material cosmic manifestation rests. This is explained by the Vedic statement. Yatova imani bhutani jayati, yena jatani jivanti. So here we have a nice philosophical discussion about the soul. We find this discussion also in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 2. It's the distinction between soul and body. And this is distinction between soul and body is often emphasized in Bhagavatam, but it goes further back. It goes to Upanishads, Vedas. So throughout the Vedic literature, we'll find this principle of distinguishing Atma from material body. So that, of course, this becomes the process of the Jnana Yoga, in which there is an emphasis upon study of Upanishads and Brahma Sutras to come to the conclusion that we're not the body, we are Atma. So this emphasis on the human being developing intelligence or discriminating power is often emphasized. We call this ability viveka, to distinguish things nicely. So, of course, in the material world, we distinguish things. One is different from two is different from four, etc. Or dog is different from cat, human being is different from bird. So we make all sorts of distinctions in the material world. That's our normal type of distinction. But when the scriptures talk about viveka, or distinction of the ability of the intelligence to make proper distinctions, the ultimate distinction is the difference between the body and the soul. So, in other words, we're involving a distinction between matter and spirit, not between matter and matter. So, this is real intelligence, real use of intelligence. So this type of viveka or intelligence is emphasized in the Vedic literature. If we do not do so, and we simply emphasize material intelligence, we will keep making distinctions between material forms and material bodies. That's all. In one sense, this is what we call material knowledge. So if you go to the library will be full of books, and all these books will be about material knowledge, distinctions in the material world. Prabhupada here talks about analysis of your body into chemicals. Chemistry is one of the sciences. It is distinguishing different types of matter, ultimately different types of atoms. Nickel is different from iron, is different from oxygen, different from carbon, etc. And then these combine to make bigger molecules like H2O, water, etc. All this is based on distinctions. We're distinguishing different types of atoms. So that is what chemistry is. We go to physics. What is physics? Distinguishing, again, matter in a different way. That is distinguishing how these things operate. And so we're distinguishing different laws by which objects operate. So we have laws of gravity, laws of motion, laws of mass, etc., all these sort of things. And then we have things like speed, analyzing speed. So but we're analyzing things. And we're trying to make principles out of things based upon our analysis. Well, this is all material intelligence. And it's good in one sense, and it's not denied by the Vedic literature. We will see that the followers of the Veda observed the material world very carefully. And in fact, they were always looking at the sky. So they developed astronomy, as far as the Vedas. This is Jyotish. It's all based on observations of the sky. And we have to figure out where the planet's going to be on a particular day. And how do we do that? We have to analyze the movement of all the planets. And unfortunately, the planets don't move like the sun, which is very regular. We know where the sun is every day, or the moon is every day. Other planets don't move like that. So they have very complicated orbits in comparison to our vision. So we have to make very complicated formulas using trigonometry and whatever, what's the other one, calculus, all these formulas, because all, not circular orbits and whatever, and they seem to go fast and slow and whatever. But there's very complicated formulas based upon complicated mathematics. So they develop very complicated mathematics also. And all of this is based on analyzing things, all viveka. So the followers of the Vedas were not shy to use material viveka also. They did so. And they developed all sorts of science, just like we have Ayurveda as well. And what is Ayurveda? Talking about material body against material, and it analyzes the body and your blood and your bones and your dhatus and whatever, and then your body with your doshas and whatever, and pitta and vayu and all this. It's all analysis, the material analysis. But useful because we do have material bodies in this material world. So, Vedas and the people following the Vedas did not deny the existence of intelligence being useful for analyzing the material world and developing different sciences. No problem. But that's not the only use of our intelligence. The higher use of intelligence is to distinguish Atma from material body. But that's a big leap because you cannot look at it with your material eye and see the Atma or whatever like that. It cannot be observed in the same way. Prabhupada mentions here, the soul is 1/10,000th of the tip of the hair. Of course, we can't see that small. But even if we could, it wouldn't be even that big. Because soul is not measurable by material dimensions anyway. But it's very small. So how small, we don't even know. We can't even analyze the size of the soul. Maybe it doesn't have a material dimension at all. This type of analysis can be there, but you can't analyze it and see it. So that since you can't see it, material says, well, you can't prove it because we cannot see it. And so people will say, show me God, show me Atma. If you don't show it to me, I don't believe it. That, to some extent, that's reasonable. But then again, even in science, we have things you cannot see. We cannot see the size of the universe, yet they give us the size of the universe. They give us all sorts of theories about black holes and white holes and dwarfs and whatever in the sky. We don't see those things. We can indirectly intuit them with, telescopes and whatever, but we don't actually see anything. No? So a lot of things that we don't, in science even, it's all theory, it's not based on physical seeing things. No. So that we cannot use that as the final argument. Simply because we can't see it doesn't mean it exists. Of course, we have another way of knowing that is called Anuman, inference. So that's what Prabhupada does here. He uses inference. And it's also useful to some degree, but it's also not absolute. As we know, science has a lot of inference, but sometimes it's wrong. And later on they come up and they have to reject something and make a new theory because the inference is wrong. And they make a new theory as a result of that. So inference is useful. Prabhupada gives the example of, here we say, what is this? Let's say, it's my hand. And what is this? It's my foot. What is this? It's my eye. Okay, so we have a foot, a hand, an eye, a leg, a finger, my finger. So we're talking about my. But who is the eye behind that? possesses all of these things. We don't say, I am the hand, but it's my hand. So who is the I that possesses the hand and the eye and the foot? Who is that? So then nobody can really answer. So some will say mind, but we say my mind. So it cannot be the mind because it's my mind also. So the I is not the mind also. We say it's intelligence, it's my intelligence. But again, it's not I am the intelligence, I have intelligence. So where is the I? So this shows there's something else there also, which is different from intelligence, body, etc. You know, that's the inference, we're using inference here. Based upon our use of language, which is based upon our observations of ourselves. So by inference, we think there is something else called I, which is separate from my body, my mind, and my intelligence. That's inference. Of course, we know inference also may be wrong. An example of inference, the famous example is if we see smoke on a mountain, we will say there is fire on the mountain. We don't see the fire, we see smoke only. How do we conclude there is fire on the mountain? Because we have a principle where there is smoke, there is fire. Fire produces smoke. So we see smoke on the mountain, there must be a producer of the smoke, there must be a fire. So there must be fire on the mountain because we see the smoke. We don't see any fire. So this is inference. However, how do you know it's smoke? We're assuming it's smoke. It could be a cloud. So if it's a cloud that looks like smoke on the mountain, then we're wrong. We go there, it was a cloud, it was not any fire to make the smoke, it was a cloud. So we say there is fire on the mountain because I see smoke. It's wrong because it wasn't smoke after all. We assumed it was smoke, but it was not smoke, it was a cloud. So that's the wrong inference due to wrong observation. We're thinking it is smoke, but it's cloud. So inference is not always correct either. Observations are not correct. The inference is based upon the observation. Oh, I see smoke on the mountain, but it was not smoke, it was cloud. So my sense perception is wrong, and therefore my inference is wrong, therefore my knowledge is wrong. So therefore, their sense perception or production and anuman, inference, are very much related together. And either is wrong, we could make a mistake. We could make a mistake also, not because of the observation, but because of the logical inference. And that is, where there is smoke, there is fire. But that's not always true either. The fire could have been there, and the fire went out, and somebody put some water on the fire, and it made some more smoke after the fire had gone out. So we go to the mountain, look for the fire, there was no fire there, the smoke was still coming out. So again, it's wrong inference. So, both are subject to mistake or error. So this is a defect of our knowledge. Because most of our material knowledge, or all of our material knowledge, is based upon perception and inference, production, anuman. That's where we get all the material knowledge we have. We see things with our senses, and then we make inferences. So all the books in the library and all the sciences are all these two things combined. They can be faulty. So we cannot rely upon these to get absolute knowledge about Atma or Supreme Lord. What makes it more difficult is we cannot perceive them with the material sense, and thus we We cannot make any inferences about them. So, production and anam are useless regarding something we can't even perceive. So, how to prove it? Ultimately. So that is why we have the third proof, Shabda, or scripture, authoritative sound, which is scripture. This is knowledge that is not based upon perception or logic. It is simply stated. We have relative sabda in terms of textbooks. In your school, you have textbooks. They're a type of sabda, and we simply accept them, and then we study them, and then when the exam comes, you repeat everything in the book and say it's authoritative. And you don't challenge it. Well, it's not true. The book is not true. And we can go back and say, who's the author of the book? Okay, some famous physicist wrote this book. Harvard University. And then we could challenge that and finally go back, well, Einstein's theory. We say, why Einstein? Is he's not perfect? So we could challenge everything, but in science, we don't challenge some authorities. So we have authorities in science, authorities in mathematics, authorities in psychology or whatever. Psychology is all sorts of sciences, authorities we have. So that's a type of sabda for us, but it's not absolute. So the other type of sabda is authoritative knowledge coming from the Supreme Lord ultimately, and therefore that is without fault, infallible. That is scripture. As the Supreme Lord is perfect, and he has scriptures which are perfect, then we can accept those as perfect knowledge. So this is where we'll get knowledge of Atma and Supreme Lord. Of course, we can say, I don't accept that authority. Fine. Just as you can go to the university, I don't accept authority in my textbooks. Fine, you can do that. Then you won't get that knowledge. So you can refuse Vedas and also not get that knowledge. It's the choice of the individual. So at some point, our knowledge depends on faith. If you don't have faith in your school, you don't go to it. There's some school that universities got very bad reputation, whatever. Everybody gives it, don't go to that university, it's terrible. School, they cheat you, they do this, your degree is worthless when you get out, nobody's gonna look at your degree, so you can't get a job. So, some so-called authorities, not real authorities at all, and we have to reject them. And we'll try to choose one school with repute. So we put our faith in that particular school. How do we do that? We have faith in other people's statements because we haven't even gone anywhere to any of these places to study, so we don't know. We have to take the faith on faith. We accept the statements of people who did go there. They said it's useless. Maybe once they use us trying to say good, then we can't accept it. But if we all say it's a useless place, we won't accept it. But it's based on faith again. Faith that these people are actually not cheating us. So to some degree, faith is also necessary even in material acquisition of knowledge. So what to speak of spiritual knowledge? We have to have some faith. Faith in a particular scripture, we follow it. See if we can get some nice results. So, therefore, we have faith in the scripture, we accept the scripture, and then we accept that knowledge. And from that we will get knowledge of Atma, knowledge of Supreme Lord. So that is the process of getting spiritual knowledge. Once we get the knowledge, that has to become realized knowledge. And we do that through a particular process. So we call these yogas. So we have Jnana Yoga, Stanga Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga, by which, following scripture, we get the result of our knowledge. So all of these different yogas are mentioned in the Vedic literatures. And there again, according to our faith, we will follow one yoga or another yoga. And again, if we look at the scripture, we will see which is the best yoga, so we should follow that yoga. And so Krishna says Bhakti Yoga is the best, we should follow that. It's all in scripture. But you may not have faith in Bhakti scripture, you may have faith in Jnana scripture. So what can we do? You can follow Jnana scripture, and we cannot argue with you. If you say it's part of Vedas, okay, it's part of Vedas. We don't argue with that. So, there are alternatives offered in the Vedic literature for different types of yoga. According to your faith, you practice different yogas, but don't expect the same result. If you practice Jnana yoga, you realize Atma. If you practice Ashtanga yoga, you realize Parramatta. If you practice Bhakti yoga, you realize Bhagavatam. So, all the processes are accepted, they're all spiritual, but we get different realizations of one spiritual entity. Atma, or Brahman, Parramatta, and Bhagavan. We get 3 different results. All spiritual, but they're different. So in one sense, yes, all's approved, and therefore they're all in the Vedic literatures. But then, Bhakti is also complete realization. So this is the one which we should prefer. It is like going to a college. You have a choice of colleges. And according to you can get a PhD in each college. Nevertheless, you choose a particular college because it has better reputation. You get better knowledge there. In spite of the fact that all generally it's all PhD, it's all the same physics PhD. But you go to MIT, it's considered much better. You go to some unknown university, okay, PhD and so on. So, it's all spiritual. Brahman, Parramatta, Bhagavan. Processes are all spiritual. Jnana yoga, Ashtanga yoga, Bhakti yoga, but nevertheless, Scripture tells us which is actually the best. So therefore we have the best realization of Supreme Lord in the form of Bhagavan, and the best process to follow, Bhakti yoga. Each process gives a particular result. You go to one university, you only get a degree from there. You don't get a degree from. You go to here, you're not going to get an MIT degree. You're just going to get a local college degree. So you practice Jnana yoga, you get Brahman realization. Okay, that's all. Nothing further. Practice Bhakti yoga, you get Bhagavan realization. So according to a different process, you get different spiritual results. All spiritual, but that's different results. And with those results, Bhakti gives the highest results. So that's up to our individual taste and our individual knowledge. We have the good fortune to practice according to the Bhakti scriptures, then we will get that highest knowledge, get Bhakti yoga, of which we realize Bhagavan. Okay, any questions?
My question is that, as you said, Bhakti yoga is the practice, and nowadays, my question is, as you said that in the university there are very few who did PhD, and this is like the very highest while studying one particular field. So, but now Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said yes, that his road is will be spread to the whole world, and most of the people are attracted to karma and so how can make the people to come to the Bhakti yoga?
How do we make them come to Bhakti yoga?
As many Bhakti yogas.
Okay.
According to statistics, it is said like most people are Christianity, Muslims, like Hindus, even Hindu monks. Hindus, very few are like Krishna conscious. Even is the highest, how we can go to very easily because
Of course, material world, but not even interested in karma jnana and Sangha yoga. Just simply enjoying the material world, no yoga. This is a real big problem in Kali Yoga. They're not following any scripture, and not doing any yoga, and their only goal is to stay in the material world, in this material body, and get your happiness here now. Not even next lifetime, as in karma yoga. Just in this lifetime, doesn't matter what happens next lifetime. So it's not even karma yoga. So this is the misfortune of people in the mode of ignorance. This is what we call tamaguna and rajaguna. So it is a problem in Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga means 1/4 of Dharma is left, so everybody is sinful, everybody is in ignorance. So it's going to be difficult to do things. Fortunately, the process of bhakti is not really in the gunas at all. If you want to do Jnana Yoga or Sangha Yoga, you have to be in Sattva Guna, and that's going to be impossible in Kali Yuga. For Bhakti Yoga, anybody in any guna can practice. This doesn't belong to the gunas at all, it's in your guna. But everybody can practice. So in that sense, Bhakti Yoga is more suitable for the people of Kali Yuga, because it doesn't depend on which guna you're in to start the process. Only depends on faith. So that's the major factor. How do we produce faith in people? That's all.
Adding on the same question, you say that bhakti can be practiced anywhere. It
Yeah.
depends on faith only.
Yeah.
But we find when we are from Nepal, and when we were traveling, they took all the fruits, no fruits allowed in there. Then they have choices to eat only Jain food. They prefer the
Jain food.
They can eat Jain food.
Yeah.
And then we just offer mentally.
Yeah.
And then we eat. Those were so bad. So regarding feelings, that can be depression. But sometimes now we are going to Singapore, they said, we cannot be a country mother. We cannot be very displaced.
Yeah.
So there are so many external restrictions are also there. In such a situation, how we can manage?
How can we
How we
reach?
can still, because sometimes it makes me so awkward without very country mother, without putting like,
Yeah.
we can various like for myself, I feel.
Yeah. Well, the nature of bhakti is such, it doesn't depend on externals at all. So the preaching will not depend on whether you have tilak or netmix, ultimately. Of course, these are good for our sadhana, but the bhakti does not depend on that.
Can I get more elaborate?
So I don't know, did Haridas Thakur wear tilak even? I don't think he even wore tilak, Haridas Thakur. Or neck beads or whatever. I don't know. So the bhakti itself ultimately doesn't depend on those things. Of course, we have our sadhana, and these are things for our sadhana, but even if you don't have those things, at least you remember the Lord and you chant His name. And even if you cannot chant loudly and do kirtan on the street, you can chant it in your mind. And you can succeed. So that's the flexibility of bhakti and nam sankirtan. Anywhere, in any condition, doesn't depend on this or that or whatever situation. Some situations are favorable, definitely, but nevertheless, you can do it in any condition.
Thank you, Maharaj, for this wonderful class. Regarding Prabhupada differentiation between soul, mind, intelligence, and from your class, I was thinking, who is the knower of soul? Who is the knower of soul? Because as you said, intelligence is the one who can difference between, who can get knowledge and say this is wrong, this is right. But how can the intelligent know the soul? Because soul, we are soul, we have our own qualities, like Sachidananda, and these material things, intelligence.
So, in the material world, we use our mind, intelligence, etc., to learn things from whatever. And so we may think, oh, I'm the intelligence, because my intelligence is, my mind is learning, or whatever.
Look like Maharaj, I am not the soul, I am the intelligence, because I am overseeing everything and grabbing knowledge.
Yeah. But the point is that though it looks like this, when we go from the spiritual point of view, we say that liberation means give up gross body and subtle body, which means your mind, intelligence, also have to be, they're bondage, they are upadi, they are covering on the soul, they're different from the soul, and they create an obstacle to the soul. So ultimately, you have to reject even your intelligence and your false ego. It's not Atma. And as you think you are intelligence, you can't get liberation. No mukti. Can't get out of the material world that way. Huh? So, what realizes Atma then? It's not your mind, intelligence, or material things. They're not. They're just instruments. It's like your computer is a material thing, so it doesn't know anything as such. This is useful for you to know, but it doesn't know itself. So the intelligence and mind don't really know anything. They're just useful for the Atma. But nevertheless, we have to give them all up also as being coverings. And so what ultimately realizes Atma? Atma itself. It is self-manifesting, svaprakasha. Atma realizes itself. It does not depend upon the mind, intelligence, ego, etc. So if you get realization, it's Atma realizes itself. So the yogi, his procedure is to stop all the functions of the mind. Chitta, vritti, nirodha. Destroy functions of chitta, material consciousness completely. I am this, I am that, whatever, thinking this, whatever. And then what happens? Atma realizes itself. It manifests itself, independent of intelligence, ego, body, etc., senses, whatever. So ultimately, the realization is through Atma itself. We use reading books or whatever, studying Vedanta, we're using our mind and intelligence, we're using Viveka or whatever. It's a little bit different though, because it's guided by scripture, not by our material Viveka. So even that intelligence we're using, even though it looks material, is actually guided by spiritual intelligence itself, because it's not different from Krishna. So therefore it's a little bit different from material Viveka, etc. So therefore when we're using our mind and intelligence and senses for Krishna, we're actually invoking our spiritual mind, intelligence, senses. And ultimately develop spiritual mind senses. So we get a spiritual body in the spiritual world. So we can perceive Krishna, understand Krishna, and analyze Krishna with our spiritual mind, spiritual intelligence, not material mind intelligence. In the spiritual world we can do that without a material body. So that Atma itself will develop all the functions that we think are, we depend on this material world for our knowledge. So the soul develops those functions through the process of bhakti yoga. By engaging your senses, mind, intelligence in scriptures, spiritual scriptures, and Krishna. So we can say that our senses, mind, and body become spiritualized, even though we're using them in bhakti yoga. They become spiritualized in that process. And finally they get rejected completely, and we have our pure spiritual mind, intelligence, ego, etc.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dhanavad. Maharaj, may I ask, the body, when it functions, the energy comes from the Parramatta or the Jiva, or the soul?
Okay, so actually the answer is both ultimately, because any energy from the soul ultimately comes from Parramatta. But Parramatta doesn't interfere with the jiva. So when the jiva leaves the body, Parramatta leaves the body and doesn't stay there and do anything with the body. But if the jiva leaves, finds the body unfit, then Parramatta leaves with it and whatever, and then helps the jiva in the next body. So while the jiva is in the material body, Parramatta acts as the witnessing permitter and assistant. But the jiva is the main person who's giving the energy to his body. If we want, of course, from another point of view, like in the Upanishads, it says that the spirit, the Lord is the eye of the eye and the ear of the ear. So the real hearer, the real seer, the real toucher is ultimately Parramatta. He's the Supreme Lord. So he's everything ultimately. But then that would take away the individuality of the jiva also. So it's only in the sense that ultimately everything depends on Parramatta, but then he permits the jiva to operate his body in a certain way. So gives the jiva the power to do that.
So, meaning that the energy is come from the Paramatma, and the energy was given to the jiva, and the jiva will use the energy.
Yeah, we can say that.
The Paramatma gives the energy to the soul, and the soul will use the energy to move the body.
Yeah, of course, when we talk about energy, this energy is not material energy. So the energy which is moving our body ultimately is material. So where does the material energy come from? So this is our construction of our body by Brahma. He makes our body in a certain way. And we have pranas and all sorts of things there, and dhatus and pitta and all these different things in our body. And all of this, which are material, related to material elements. So the energy is there within the material body, but ultimately it doesn't function without the Atma being there. Atma goes out and it falls apart. So ultimately the source of that energy is the Atma. But the Atma itself does not have material energy. It is a spiritual force that gives some energy, makes the energy of the material body cooperate and work properly. If that spiritual energy is not there, then the material energy does not operate properly. So we have the same relationship between spiritual energy of the Atma, spiritual energy of the Spirit Lord, gives spiritual energy of the Atma, who, with his spiritual energy, arranges for the material energy to operate properly. But of course we know that energy systems in the material world deteriorate. Like a car, eventually it will deteriorate and get old and the parts will stop functioning and get old. So the body will do that also. It will get old and then the energy systems do not work anymore in that body. So then the jiva goes outside.
Then the material energy, who control and manage the material energy then? Because now the material energy based from the soul, spiritual energy will influence the material energy to function. And even when the Atma is gone from the body, the body will deteriorate. Then who control and manage the material energy that body will deteriorate?
Well, we can say that ultimately Parramatta and Jiva are the controllers in the body. But then the body is arranged in such a way that the Jiva doesn't have to think at every moment. Now, this atom is moving this way, and the air is moving this way, and the blood is moving this way. It's constructed in such a way that it seems to operate almost on its own, but actually it doesn't, because the soul leaves the whole thing falls apart. But it's constructed in a very delicate way by Brahma under the Supreme. And when the soul leaves, then the whole system falls apart.
Maharaj, in Bhagavad Gita said, Pratyaksham Bhagavan Dharmyam. Can you explain that?
Yeah. That is the perception. Of course, that means perception. When we say production in terms of production Anuman and Samdha, of course, we're talking more particular version, but nevertheless, it's perception in general, which means directly perceived in a sense. In other words, when we do something and it's a promised result, we don't get the result, we'll say, I don't like this process. You go to university, don't give you a degree, then you're not going to go to university anymore. So we do Jnana Yoga, Astanga Yoga, or Karma Yoga, whatever, and there's promises. So the promise of Karma Yoga is Svargaloka. promise of jnana and yoga is mukti. And of course, when we get it, no more karma, no more birth and death, etc. So that's the result, promise result. And promise of bhakti is prema. So if you do the process, you should observe the result ultimately. And if you don't get the result, why do it? Okay? However, we depend on scripture and the faith in the scripture. So the promise is there, we don't get it immediately. So the person practices karma yoga, he doesn't get svargaloka immediately, but the promise is there. So because of his faith, he believes in the promise. And then of course scripture says you get it, whatever like that. So, but we cannot directly perceive the svargaloka result. However, we can perceive some intermediate results. Okay, you become a little more peaceful in this life, or whatever. So, similar with all the other processes, moksha. So the promise is there, but it's a long process. It may take many lifetimes. So we can't directly perceive it in this lifetime at all. It's going to take many lifetimes. Nevertheless, because of the effects of it. Even the sadhaka of jnana becomes more peaceful and we detach from material energy, etc. And then something is perceptible. And the same with bhakti. So bhakti gives the promise of prema. And we don't perceive that directly because it's also going to take time. But we can also perceive results on the way. So that's explained in Nectar Devotion. There's two symptoms that manifest in sadhana bhakti, that is kleshakini and subhadha. And the kleshakini means the destruction of suffering. And subhadha means bestowal of good qualities. Or happiness, spiritual happiness. Not ananda, that only comes with bhava. But at least you get some spiritual satisfaction. So these are production. These are directly observable as you do sadhana bhakti. So you get out of your miserable circumstance in the material world, and you also get spiritual satisfaction. So you continue the process because you get the result, and that is practice. So that much production you get in terms of sadhana bhakti.
One question.
Sorry, Maharaj. Regarding the question before I asked, I was thinking, Maharaj, which one is real position? Soul knowing soul? Soul knowing soul. And as you said, when we realize ourselves, then we develop spiritual mind intelligence. And now my question is, the stage come after dissolution of all this material mind intelligence ego, we come to the platform of knowing soul. Soul know himself. And then after we develop spiritual mind intelligence ego.
I mean, what is the stage?
Yeah.
Well, if you do bhakti, you'll get them simultaneous. If you do jnana, all you get is first atma, and then if you get mercy of devotees, you practice bhakti, then you start developing your senses, etc., as long as you have the body now. But if you do bhakti, with the process of bhakti, simultaneously you get rid of your material body, you go beyond liberation, and you develop spiritual body. So it happens with the process of bhakti, which is simultaneously. Atma is realized plus development of spiritual body. You can't be separated because if you did, you would end up in Brahman. This was the Atma part. If that happened first. So simultaneously, you're developing your spiritual qualities. So if you get to bhava stage after sadhana, you can perceive the Lord. How do you perceive the Lord? Not with material eye. You have to perceive with spiritual eye. You hear the Lord, spiritual ear, not material ear. If you get to Atma, there's no perception of anything. Because there's no duality. There is no Supreme Lord. There's only I. So there is no perception. There's no ear, no eye, no anything to perceive anything. But with bhakti, then we're hearing, seeing, whatever, using, of course, material senses, and through that we start developing our spiritual senses, so that when we get to bhakti, we actually see Krishna with our spiritual eye. So that and when you get to that stage, you're actually destroying material ahankara, all these things. So your attachments and your identity with material body and mind and intelligence, false ego, also they're also rejected at that stage.
That to realize self as a soul, but when I live somewhere, many times we read that even we have to reject that I am soul, I am the servant of Krishna. Then we have to understand I belong to Krishna.
Yeah.
So in that stage, we see the power of soul, that how body is functioning, everything. So when we identify ourselves as that I am servant, so is that it is said like real ego and false ego both.
Is it?
Real ego and false ego.
Yeah.
False ego saying that I am this body,
Yeah.
and real ego saying I am Atma, I
Yeah.
am servant. So can we get some understanding that being a servant, what can be like, or being the Atma, which one is better, or is there a different level that as you practice it, you go on or not?
Oh, well, yeah. So our acharyas explain that one sense ego is not destroyed. Now the false ego of the material world is a material element. It comes out from, Mahatattva, and then false ego, that's material, that's not the property. So that cannot go to the spiritual world. But Atma, without discoverings, always has an individual identity, which we say is an ahankara, an identity, I, because jiva can see, do, hear, experience. So that's being I experience, I see, I do. That's the nature of Atma. Each individual Atma is different. And each is seeing, doing, experiencing. So each jiva has individual experience. So that's an individual I there. That's an ahankara. So that's there in the spiritual world. But in the material world, the I gets transferred to the body through material ahankara. I am the body. I experience, so my body is experience, but I think I am the body, so there's a fault, that's what I call false ego. You think we're the body, and then the body is experiencing, the body is seeing, whatever like that. Spiritual world, there's no separation like that. I is the Atma, and I experience, I see Krishna, whatever. I am the servant of Krishna. So that's the spiritual ahankar with his proper identity. And in the Brahman state, it's simply I. Without the material ahankara interfering, I am the body. I. But there's no perception of anything, because there's oneness and there's nothing else there. So it's just pure consciousness, the I consciousness, that's all. But if we go beyond that to bhakti, then I am the servant of Krishna, I see Krishna, I observe Krishna, I serve Krishna, etc. So there's the spiritual ahankara there. And spiritual possessiveness, mamata.
Soul is made of Satchidananda, and we have material elements like 8 elements, earth, water, fire, air, like these 8 elements. Is that the spiritual body as a combination is Satchidananda? Is a subtle, most subtle elements with which the spiritual body made up.
Is it?
Like Atma is said as Satchidananda,
Yeah.
and we heard that it cannot be like measured size is also given. So in the spiritual body, when a person gets spiritual body, he said that made of Satchidananda. So is that both the hand and everything is like a combination of that subtle body? Is it subtle or like?
Is it?
Is the body subtle or is it low?
It's all spiritual.
Yeah, no, how you understand spiritual?
The spiritual body is made of Satchidananda,
Yeah.
And how we can understand that Sat, Chit, Ananda is an element, because earth is easy to perceive, like as element. Similarly, spiritual body is element, how we can understand more better.
Well, it's non-material, so we can't carry on a material conception of elements, etc., into the spiritual world, like, material heart, material lung, material skin, material eye.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing. And there's no dependency, because everything here in the material is dependent on the food you eat and breathing, etc. So that type of dependence is not there in the spiritual world. So the Atma and its subtle body and its so-called gross body are all one with the Atma. It's all spiritual. It's all Satchidananda. And it's not affected by the gunas, and not affected by karma, not affected by ignorance, and not limited by time and space. So it's quite different from our conception of body and whatever in the material world, or even mind in the material world. Nevertheless, it functions something like our material body and mind, because you have hands and feet, and you see and you hear, and you have an identity, and you serve Krishna, etc. So it operates something like the material body, but it's also quite different, because it's all based upon prema, not upon ignorance.
Somewhere I heard from Prabhupada lecturers, they say Prabhupada, as a person goes in the tailor, has a body and make the shape of the dress. Like a person going for a suit, and according to body they are preparing the dress. Similarly, Prabhupada was saying that Atma has also body. So that time I did not understand.
Well, it develops through bhakti. If you don't know bhakti, you're in Brahman, there's no form. No forms in Brahman, no perceptions. You don't need an eye, because there's nothing to see. There's only oneness. There's no seeing anything. There's no duality. So you don't need anything there. So the spiritual form of the Atma will develop according to our service to Krishna. If we want to serve Krishna, we need a body, a spiritual body. We want to see Krishna in spiritual eyes. With bhakti, then, the spiritual body develops. If you do jnana or yoga, it does not develop.
In case of few devotees, even they are, while living in this world, they are experiencing their spiritual body effect. But still he has to leave the body.
Yeah, because their spiritual body is completely different from the material body. So the devotee serves externally with his material body, he can serve the deity, but nevertheless that body is limited. It depends on food and oxygen and whatever like that, but the spiritual body does not. So the experience of prema also is limited within the material body. It creates a limitation. So if they can get a higher experience of prema, that spiritual body will reject the material body completely, and then will develop fully.